You're listening to the Adventurous Reinvention podcast. I'm Allison Boyle, aka She Dreams of Alpine, and this is the show that's dedicated to all the adventurous spirits out there who have either been transformed by the outdoors or are interested in what it looks like to step into a new, adventurous, and courageous kind of identity in their life. It doesn't matter what your background is in the outdoors, what age you're starting at, or where you grew up. If you're curious about the outdoors and using adventure as a way to reinvent yourself, you're in the right place. I'll be sharing all kinds of personal adventure stories, lessons I've learned from the mountains, teaching what I know about the outdoors and leadership, and interviewing some amazing adventurous women all along the way. I've been coaching women on becoming safe, confident, and self-sufficient backpackers and leaders of their own adventurous lives since 2018, and I know exactly what big fears and self-doubts can pop up along the way. I have so much to share with you, so let's dive in. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 14 of the Adventurous Reinvention podcast. So today I wanted to talk about a topic, how to make adventure friends as an adult. And I actually recently hosted a 5-day challenge. We called it the Your Adventure Era Challenge. You might have heard me talking about it, or you might have attended this event. And we had a day that talked all about this topic. And it's something that I get asked about a lot because a lot of people struggle with making friends as an adult. And also if they weren't adventurous or outdoorsy before, like finding people to go on adventures with, be outdoorsy with, go do the things that they want to do is a challenging thing for many of my clients. So I wanted to actually share the day 3 from the Your Adventure Era Challenge, the audio from that day to kind of share my tips and tricks and strategies for making and creating your adventurous community. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this replay from our Your Adventure Era Challenge about how to make adventure friends as an adult. Okay, enjoy. So challenge day 3, how to make adventure friends. So I want to encourage you that your dream hiking and backpacking community, they do exist. And I know how to help you find them because this is something that I've been doing and creating for the last 11, 12 years now, right? So I'm going to be sharing with you a lot of my tips and strategies that have worked best for me. So making friends as an adult, it can feel hard, or that's what a lot of us say, right? It's scary to put ourselves out there. It can feel awkward, right? Where do you even start to find like-minded friends? It can be really scary to feel like we might get rejected or we might be judged, right? It doesn't always feel like we fit in or belong, especially if we're new. I know a lot of my clients, a big hang up for them joining group things is the fear about being too slow and holding the group back and them not wanting to be there. All these things can kind of prevent us and hold us back from making friends. But I want to share with you, before we dive into more tips on how to make adventure friends and adventure community, I want to share my number 1 strategy to attracting the most ideal adventurous friendships. And if you've been in my world for a while, then you might know what I'm alluding to. So I want you to become that friend. I want you to become the outdoorsy friend that everyone wants to go on adventures with. And that is the best way to start attracting your community. So in my opinion, waiting around on somebody who is more experienced to suddenly come into your life and mentor you and be willing to do that will often feel elusive, like you're catching a glimpse of Bigfoot, right? It's just something that doesn't happen to most people very often. When you first learn to become self-sufficient in your own skills in the outdoors and you take ownership of your safety in the outdoors and your adventure goals, you are more likely to attract the community that you are craving to build. So for me, it's so much easier to show up as an equal and active partner in adventure, or to show up as the friend who is willing to teach, right? Maybe you have friends in your life who are also interested in this, but they're not as willing to learn what it takes to be self-sufficient. But maybe you are, and you are a friend who's willing to teach and bring others along with you. It's so much easier to be that active partner or friend willing to teach than to look for a friend who is willing to mentor, especially if you don't know them already, right? It's much easier to find friends this way. The energy is a lot different, right? So when you are an active and equal partner in adventures, or you are the friend who's teaching, it's more of like a give energy, like, oh, I'm an active and equal partner. I'm giving to this adventure relationship versus like, hey, can you just teach me everything because I want to learn, right? It's more of a take energy. And that is so much easier to find friends that are adventurous and outdoorsy when you're in that kind of give energy. So I just wanted to share an example with you. This is a picture of me from my very first backpacking trip. This is 2013 Allison. She quickly realized that waiting to be invited would mean less adventures. So I told you all that story on day one. When I was introducing myself, I had gotten invited on a backpacking trip by my coworkers. And I thought after that trip, I was like, oh my gosh, like these are going to be my adventure buddies. And I quickly learned that for them, this was kind of like a once in a random kind of thing. And they actually didn't even have that much backpacking experience. They just had always wanted to do Half Dome. It was kind of like one of those bucket list things. It wasn't necessarily something they were doing a lot of. And I wanted to be outdoors and go backpacking and go hiking a lot. Like I wanted it to be like a more integral part of my life. And so I quickly learned that I needed to learn what it took to be self-sufficient so that I could start leading and planning my own adventures. So if I look back at like 2014, the year like I was kind of stepping more into that and learning more things to now where I am, like I take ownership of the adventures that I want to go on. And for me, this has been the number one way of attracting the most amazing community of friends into my life who want to come with me. And now at this point, like I have built up such a community that it's also kind of reciprocal. They're inviting me to things as well. So this has also been really true with my clients. It's something that I preach with my clients. I'm like, if this is something you really want, like learn the skills, and we're going to teach you those in our Backpacking Badass program, and then take ownership of being that leader. And you'll find that so many people want to go with you because they're not willing to kind of step into that leadership role, right? So this is Chevelle. She talks about going on a backpacking trip with a couple of friends, right? And then Jessica, she talks about how she was the primary planner of the trip. First time, usually the boys took the lead, and this was her first time leading the trip and bringing her friends along on the ride. So this quote, I'm sure you maybe heard this quote before, like game recognizes game. But basically what I mean by this is like, I want you to show up as the person that you want to attract, right? Even if you're not fully confident in all your skills, like you're willing to learn, like you're doing the things to try to get better at some of the skills that you want to learn. You're being a really active participant in your mentorship, if that makes sense. So this is another example of one of my students. Gilly, she had joined our program and she became self-sufficient in her skills, but she was still relatively new to backpacking. And I remember she shared this win, and I just loved this win because she said, I went backpacking with a group of seasoned hikers this weekend, and it felt wonderful to be completely self-sufficient and prepared. No one would have known. It was only my third time out. So like for me, this is like the ultimate, right? You learn the skills, you start feeling confident in your skills. You are that active participant in your adventures and an equal partner on these group trips when you go out with more experienced people. That is going to like want them to invite you out more. So you can be new to backpacking and also prepared for its challenges and risks without having to rely on a group of experienced backpackers by your side. And again, this is something that we teach in the Backpacking Badass program. I'm going to tell you all about that on Monday if that's something you're interested in learning about and taking the next step with us with. So, a bonus to learning the skills and becoming self-sufficient and confident in your own skills. So, not only do I find and seen with my students and myself and my friends that not only do you attract the community that you're looking for, you also feel more confident in doing things solo. Like, I know not everybody wants to go solo, but I do find when you step into that, you're not fully so many people when they're just getting started, they're looking for community because they're too worried about doing things on their own. And it's again, it's kind of like that take energy. So they're very like feeling very reliant on other people. But as they start learning other skills and they're more reliant on themselves and more self-sufficient, more self-confident, like yes, they still really do enjoy doing group things, but they start to realize like, oh, I don't have to wait around for a group to do these things that I want to do. So these are some other examples from our backpacking at badass students. So this somebody emailed us this. I was somebody who kept thinking that I needed to have someone to go with me instead of just getting out there. But thanks to your messaging, I've had so many wonderful adventures. She did a lot of solo things that she hadn't really done before. And another one of our students, she had always wanted to do something solo. She goes, I finally got the guts to do a solo hiking trip to celebrate my birthday. And it was the best treat I ever gave to myself. So this is what that confidence level can give you, these gifts of like doing things on your own and not having to wait around. So I want you by the end of this week, like I want it to be a commitment at the end of part of your adventure era commitment, right? To stop waiting for another adventurous person to like magically appear in your life if you want to go on more hiking and backpacking adventures. Instead, be an active participant in learning what it takes to be safe and self-sufficient. And you're going to notice that more of those people come into your life. So let's talk about some of my 5 top tried and true tips for finding adventure friends. Okay. So this is obviously the first tip I already shared. So this is an additional 5 tips. So my number one tip is learning to be self-sufficient and confident in your own skills. And these are bonus tips that I want to share with you that have really worked well for me. Okay. So tip number one, stop being passive in your desire to make adventure friends. So this seems maybe a little obvious, but I've noticed this a lot with other people that I've coached and worked with, right? The first thing that I want you to do is set the intention to make outdoorsy friends and actively try to make them. So stop being passive in this desire. So a lot of people will come to me and be like, I really want to make an outdoorsy like community and adventure friends. And I'm like, okay, like what have you been doing so far? Like tell me what has been working for you, what hasn't been. And they're like, oh, it's so hard to make friends. That's what they'll tell me. And they haven't actually been active in their pursuit of finding friends. They have a desire, a hope, but there's like a passiveness around it, right? So I want you to be active. That's kind of a theme for today is active participant, not a passive one, right? So it's easy to tell ourselves it's hard to make friends, right? We tell ourselves that story a lot. A lot of adults do. A lot of women that I work with, I've even done it before, right? It's hard to make friends as an adult. It's easy to tell ourselves that, right? But then equally, most of us aren't really taking any actions to go out there and find the friends that we are seeking, right? So I want you to be honest with yourself. And this is like not meant to be shaming yourself or anything, but it's really just like kind of having a heart to heart with yourself. Am I actively trying to meet new people when I say I want friends, or am I just hoping it will happen? Like I will show up one day and somebody be like, do you want to be friends? Like, am I being active or I'm just hoping it'll happen? So the belief, the thought, so when I work with people like in coaching, we talk about how our thoughts create our feelings, create our actions, and create our results. I'm not going to go super deep into that, but I want to kind of like take you into this belief of it's hard to make friends. If you're constantly telling yourself that, this thought will not serve you in making friends. So, constantly saying that story to yourself in your mind is not going to help you actually make friends. So, I want you to shift away from ever telling yourself that, ever thinking that, even if it might be a practice habit at this point, you might say it a lot, just redirect, right? Like, stop, like, cut that story off. We need to start telling ourselves a different story because what we tell ourselves consistently really, really matters. So if you find yourself constantly saying, I don't make friends easily or making friends is hard, you are quite likely to create that result. Because I've said this before in other challenge videos, what we focus on is what we create. And it's so true. It really is so true, right? So I want to tell you a personal story. And this is actually from one of my goals last year. So I last year at the beginning of 2024, I had a really big rock climbing goal and I wanted to grow in kind of like my rock climbing strength and lead climbing and stuff like that. But part of that is I wanted to make climbing friends that were women because most of the time I went climbing with my husband and I had that's the most person I went climbing with. And I wanted to be like I noticed with my climbing that sometimes I would default to him taking the lead, and I wanted to take more leadership in my rock climbing. So I wanted to make more women friends because it motivated me more to be like an equal partner and an active participant. So this is an actual like screenshot from my journal from last year at the beginning of the year. I was doing like a visualization in my journal of like what I saw myself by the end of the year. And I visualized like I have a community of women I frequently go climb with in the outdoors. And I did that. So 2024 was the first year that I climbed more with my friends, like a lot more. I barely climbed with my husband last year because he kind of didn't have a climbing focus. And I did. So I was with my friends more than I climbed with my husband. And that was a really active, intentional thing that I did, but I set the clear intention that I wanted, and then I went active into going to find and make those friends. And like kind of a funny story around it is sometimes that when you have the energy of like, I'm going to be active in doing this, you'll start to notice like weird things happen. So what happened for me is I set this intention, and I remember I went to the climbing gym with my husband, and we were doing some top roping at our local gym. And I ran into an old friend that had met like 2 years ago in Colorado Springs at an entrepreneur event. And I was like, oh, hi, like I haven't seen you in a while. And we caught up, and I told her about my goals because that's one thing that I like to do. Whenever I set a goal, I start talking about it a lot. It makes it more real. It makes kind of like put some weight in it, right? So I start telling people about my goals like right away. That's something that I always do. So I told her, I was like, yeah, I just want to start climbing more this year. I want to work on my lead climbing. I'm really interested in like meeting a group of women to start climbing with. And me doing that and like being really active and like sharing my goal with that person, she invited me to start joining her and a group of other ladies that climbed every morning. Not every morning, but like 2 times a week. And those became some of my core friendships. So it was really interesting from setting the intention to like how I built that community kind of happened really fast. But I had to be like willing to show up and willing to talk to people and willing to put myself out there and showing up when people invited me, all the things. So we're going to talk a little bit about more of those, but that's kind of a really personal story that started here. So to recap, tip number one, focus on the kind of person that you'd love to meet and have as an adventure friend. Set the intention that you're really committed to putting yourself out there to find them, even if you have to fail a lot at first. And stop telling yourself the story that it's hard to make friends and start believing that it simply takes time and it takes action. Tip number two, put yourself out there, right? So this might feel a little bit more obvious, but I actually think it's the hardest thing to do, right? You need to practice putting yourself out there in new places and new experiences to find outdoorsy friends you're looking for. So like that example that I just shared, that was somebody I had met at an entrepreneur event 2 years ago. I would have never thought that that would have become my climbing friendship circle from that connection that I had made a long time ago, right? So friends can happen in different timelines and all kinds of different spaces, right? So here are some ideas on where to find your adventure besties. Check local parks or land conservancies for hiking groups or participate in volunteer days. That's a really great way. Some of my clients have local areas that they go and volunteer at consistently. This is a really great way to meet local like-minded folks. Another idea is to visit local adventure spots like your indoor climbing gym. If you're into rock climbing, I've made a lot of my friends through rock climbing, or bike meetups. That's something that has been really useful for me making friendships here in Colorado because I got into mountain biking. This is a really great way to meet locals again and expand your adventure hobbies, especially if you're like maybe just starting to dabble in some new things. So another story, when I moved to Colorado in, I think it was 2022, I was looking for a way to make some girlfriends. Michael and I, my husband and I, had been traveling for 3 years in a van. And so we didn't really have community. And that's why we moved to Colorado. So like we were looking to build some community, have more friendships, some more stability. We were tired of kind of traveling consistently. And I signed up for a local women's mountain biking group. And I remember I went on a ride, and it was a beginner group ride because I'm not a very good mountain biker, but it's just something I think is kind of fun. So I do it a little bit on the side of everything else that I do. And so I went to a beginner group ride, and I was riding behind this one girl, her name was Alex, and we rode together. We talked a lot during the group meetup, and there was a bunch of other people too, but I just happened to be connecting really well with her. And so at the end of the ride, I did the awkward thing, right? As adults, it can feel so awkward to like put yourself out there to like invite. It feels like you feel like a little kid. You're like, do you want to be my friend? But that's like basically what I did. And I was like, hi, would you maybe like want to bike again sometime? Maybe like, would you be interested in that? And she was stoked and she said yes. And we exchanged numbers. And that turned into one of my best friends here in Colorado because I was willing to be awkward and weird and risk rejection and judgment. And I have done this before multiple times too. I don't want to make it sound like all of my stories are success stories because I have done this. Hi, would you maybe want to bike again sometimes? And had people like not respond to my texts in the future or not be interested. But this one, it did work, right? And this is just part of your putting yourself out there and introducing yourself into new environments. So another idea where to find your adventure besties is finding online communities like Facebook groups, or I've even dabbled in Bumble BFF. So if you've heard of Bumble, it's like an online dating thing, but they have a BFF version, which is like finding friends. That one I have maybe met a couple of people. They didn't ever pan out, but it depends on where you live. Like you might connect with somebody. When I lived in Puerto Rico, I used it once and found a really good local friend that I ended up doing lots of hikes and stuff with when I lived out in Puerto Rico for a while. So this is a way to find local or long distance hiking friends as well. It may take a little bit more time and does require some caution, right? It's just like be careful when you're meeting people from the internet. Be very cautious, like do your vetting, meet in public places before you hit the trail together, all those things. So those are some tips to keep in mind and just like keep yourself safe. But I have had some success with online groups. And we have like our backpacking badass community is just an example of one of those online Facebook groups. So our students often meet up in real life and end up becoming adventure friends together. So that's something we're seeing more and more, especially as our group is getting bigger. People putting like, hey, I'm coordinating this trip here. Like, would anybody be interested? And we have different like people in different parts of the US who are creating like their own little groups that meet up or like do the work together and stuff. So online communities can be great ways to meet people. And internet friends, like we're so blessed. The internet, it's kind of like one of those blessing and a curse. Social media, like it takes away a lot of our times, but I've made some really amazing friendships from the internet. In fact, like this is just one example. This is my friend Marie. I've done an interview with her on the podcast. You should check it out. It's about the PCT, but she became one of my best friends and I met her actually on Instagram. We had a mutual interest of hiking and owning a business brought us together as well. And we didn't even meet up together in real life until 2 years after we started talking. But now like we're really close friends and we usually do something in real life together once a year and some sort of like adventure. So that internet friend has become like a really long-term friendship for me. And then another friend that I've met just from long time messaging over Instagram is my friend Alyssa. And she's somebody like I just hit up randomly sometimes. I'm like, hey, I'm headed to the desert for a week. What are your plans? And she'll often join me, like, because she just loves to. She lives in Utah, so we don't see each other all the time. But that friendship has been amazing too, and really random and comes from the internet as well. So don't knock those relationships as well. Also, exercise caution. A lot of these people I had talked to for a long time, and we met in public places before we did all the things. So always exercise caution, but it is a great way to meet people these days. So instead of thinking, kind of going back to that process of like, it's hard to make friends, instead of thinking it's hard to make friends, this thought is, it kind of creates a feeling of it's hopeless, right? It's hard to make friends. It makes me feel hopeless, right? That hopeless feeling doesn't inspire us into action. And instead, it usually is like us throwing in the towel. It's just like something we say at a dinner party. We're like hanging out, with family, and they're like, oh, have you been, reaching out or hanging out with anybody? And you're like, oh, it's hard to make friends, right? It doesn't really inspire momentum or action. So instead of saying that to yourself consistently, try on this new thought. I never know what new connection could turn into a lifelong friendship. And this is a thought that I like to consistently think. So when I go into new spaces or new places, or I sign up for a group meetup, or I put myself into a new experience, I never know what new connection could turn into a lifelong friendship is a thought that really serves me in making more friends. It's a playful thought. It really lights up our curiosity, like, oh, I wonder where this could go. Like, I wonder like how I might vibe with this person, right? And play and curiosity, those feelings are going to inspire action in the way of making friends. So I know that it can be scary to put yourself out there. I would consider myself an introvert. I know like watching me on a video every day for 5 days might make it seem that I'm not, but I'm a very much a practiced extrovert, right? So as introverts, those of us who like recharge really well, like being alone, and it can feel like a little nerve-wracking meeting new people, especially when we're more shy. This is how we have to find our people. Like we have to put ourselves in situations where we're going to connect with other people, even if it feels a little bit awkward, a little bit scary. So, to recap, tip number two, you got to put yourself out there, attend events at your local parks, trails, hiking meetups, volunteer trail maintenance days, expand your horizons with new adventure hobbies, right? That build on skills that you already have, like hiking to backpacking or backpacking to rock climbing. Seek out online communities that are like minded of what you would like to build in friendships in new areas. Okay, so tip number three, embrace rejection as part of the process. So this is really important. In the process of putting yourself out there, you're going to meet somebody and it won't work out, right? Or maybe it won't end up becoming a really close friend right away. Like I've mentioned a couple times in this lesson, some of my friendships have taken a year or two to cultivate into a beautiful, like partnership and friendship, right? So shrug off the bad fits and keep going. This is a really important part of finding your friendships. So don't give up just because you didn't vibe with one person or a few people, but do keep trying until you find an energetic match. Like, what if you were willing to like commit the whole year to like showing up, trying to meet your people, and you wouldn't say like we wouldn't give up. Like so many of us, we give up after that first bad interaction or the connection didn't work out. We give up after that, and we're not really learning much when we stop ourselves at that point. So I wanted to give you some perspective. When I first moved to Colorado Springs in 2022, it took me 8 months of putting myself out there. Granted, like the first 3 or 4 months when we moved here, it was a lot of overwhelm. I was still getting my bearings and I probably wasn't being as active and like looking for friendships. But starting around, because we moved here in January of 2022, and around April, I started being like, okay, I really need to like have more friends here. And I want to go do things with other people besides my husband, because that was like part of the reason we moved here is like make connections and create community. And so around April, I started really trying and putting myself out there and meeting lots of people and some of them not working. So it took me a long time to meet those friends that felt like really, really great fits, to meet somebody like Alex. And through Alex, we also connected with Haley. So it kind of grew from there. But it does take time. Like sometimes making friendships will take time, especially depending on how active and willing you are to put yourself out there. So don't make it mean something about yourself. Avoid spiraling, avoid the negative self-talk. It's nothing personal. It simply wasn't what you're looking for. Like sometimes we just have to be like, "Oh, that wasn't my friend." Like or not my friend, but like that wasn't the person I was meant to be like really good adventure friends with, right? We just have to keep going and keep thinking that they're out there for us. So get clear about what you want so that you can visualize what kind of adventure friend is out there for you. Brainstorm where she hangs out. This is an exercise of who you want to find and who you want to be. So there's room in your challenge document to kind of like spend some time, like how would you like to show up as an adventure friend? That kind of is a reflection of who you're looking for. And then also like what you're willing to do to find them and where you might find them. There's some brainstorming space for that. So I want you to believe that your friend is out there waiting for you to find them or looking for you too. So, to recap, tip number three, embrace and expect that rejection is part of the journey and it's not personal if things don't work out with somebody. This is the 50-50 experience of life. This is something I talk about a lot. I've talked about it on the podcast. We're not always going to have like wins and successes. We're going to failure, rejection, the negative emotions, fear, anxiety. These are part of the human experience. It's part of our life as a human being. So, just realize that that is just part of the process and reflect on the kind of people that you want to adventure with and the kind of adventure friend that you want to be. This will really help you get clear on when you do find that energetic match. And in the meantime, if you're learning to be self-sufficient, like I talked at the very beginning of this presentation, and you're learning to be self-sufficient and confident in your own skills, you can still go out on solo adventures until you make those friendships. So that's a really big benefit. It's like you don't have to have that huge community that you're looking for, those few friendships that you're looking for, if you have those own skills and you can go out on your own. So tip number four. I want you to treat others the way you want to be treated, which sounds so obvious, but like you've probably experienced this where you have tried to make a friend and then they ghost you, right? So I want you to like not, even if somebody is treating you in a certain way, don't treat them back in the same way. Treat them the way you would like to be treated. If you're meeting adventure friends, if meeting adventure friends is truly important to you, like treat the people that you meet and you connect with as if they could become your future besties. So text back, communicate really well, show up to the things that you say you're going to show up to. Be early, in fact. Like this just gives me a lot of confidence when I'm meeting a new friend and I'm there early and they're there early. I'm like, oh, they're invested in this. Like they're also really interested in this. They're not running late. They're not seeming frazzled. Like they seem excited to be here. Be thoughtful of this person as well. Like every now and then, like send them a note. I had a friend that I met through Facebook here in Colorado Springs. And I remember she went out of her way last year. I had only known her for maybe like a month. We had only gone to coffee like two times. But when my dog Lincoln passed away last January, she dropped off. I actually have it here at my desk. She dropped off this little picture frame of Lincoln that she got off of my Facebook and left us a card. And I was just like, wow, this is like such a good example of just somebody going out of their way to be thoughtful. And I don't even have that, like, we didn't even have that strong of a friendship then, but we're still friends today because that's the way she shows up. It's the way I like to show up as well. So don't ghost people. That is like, it's just not a nice thing to do, especially like sometimes we do it because we're feeling awkward or we don't know what to say. Like, just try not to do it. Don't play games with people. If you said you were going to show up to something, show up to it, right? Unless it's like an absolute emergency, but really try to avoid canceling on things because you're nervous, right? Nervous is a feeling that we can move through. The most underrated friendship quality, in my opinion, is somebody who is a good communicator. So be bold, be willing to make the first move, like the first text. This is probably something you could apply to dating as well, but I haven't dated in a long time. So I'm like, not speaking to this, but for friends, be the person who's willing to be the first texter, right? Text back to them when are texting you too and are interested in your life. Like reach out, like, hey, I've been thinking about you. I just did this with a friend the other day. I have a climbing friend that usually we see each other a lot just on Mondays randomly at the bouldering gym. And I just hadn't seen him in a while. So I sent him a text. I was like, hey, you still climbing? Like, just hadn't seen you at the gym in a while. And he let me know that he was okay. He'd just been traveling. But that just like kind of connected us again. And like, we'll climb again in the future, right? So remember that many people are also shy and nervous about meeting new people as well. And it's not just you. So take the initiative to kind of like step up in that department. I find it really, really helps. And then if you're thinking to yourself, like a lot of my clients, like they're really worried about it feeling awkward. And sometimes it does. Sometimes meeting a new friend is really awkward. And something that I'm just putting my dog on the ground because he's starting to get awake, a little bit fussy. Um, Sometimes especially when I'm meeting somebody for the first time, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so awkward. I'm so awkward. Like, what if we don't have anything to talk about? Like, my brain goes into all the places, right? And I just have to remind myself that awkward, like that feeling of awkwardness is an emotion. It's a feeling in my body. Like if you take that even further, like what does awkward feel like? It's just like this weird vibration, like butterfly feeling that you have in your body, right? I can handle the emotion of awkward. I am an adult. I have the emotional capacity to handle that vibration in my body and hold space for it and move on with my day after that happens, right? So we can handle the emotion of awkward, just like we talked about in day one, learning to feel the emotion of fear without letting it dictate how we show up, right? So I used to be somebody that was really shy. So much so that like my husband and a lot of my friends have told me after the fact that they wouldn't approach me at first because they thought maybe like I just was a little bit standoffish, right? So I've realized one of my personal things that I've actively had to work on over the years, and I've gotten much better at, especially with owning my own business, because you kind of have to practice a little bit being more extroverted, but I have to practice being more extroverted in order to open up to new friendships. So, to recap, tip number 4, be a good friend from the start. Practice excellent communication. Don't ignore messages or ghost people. Keep your commitments, even when it feels awkward or it feels scary or you're nervous. Like a lot of my clients will really excited. Oh, I got invited on this group hike and I'm going with this group of women. They're letting me join them. But now I'm really nervous that I'm going to be the slowest one in the group. And sometimes they'll bail because that nervousness about being the slowest one is like so overwhelming. And so I'm just going to encourage you, like, maybe you will be the slowest one, and maybe that is okay. And this is another plug to being self-sufficient, right? So if you go out into a group, you're worried about being the slowest one, but you also have the skills to keep yourself safe. If you happen to be with a group that is like, I'm going to just say this, but sometimes you go out with groups and they're not really great group people to go with. Like they'll leave you behind, right? And they may get frustrated. That does happen sometimes. Like a good group would be like willing to work with you and go at your pace, and like you guys are learning together. Anytime with your new group, I'd always expect to like, there's a learning process of like, oh, how is the group pace? How are we gonna like, keep each other safe in this hike and all those things. You're always learning with a new group. But sometimes people are not that nice, right? So if you have your own back, something that's always brought me comfort is back in the day, like I used to, like the only people I could ever find to go backpacking with were groups of guys at my work. I didn't have any girlfriends that wanted to go backpacking with, but I would always be like, yes, because I wanted more experience. So if I did find a group that was going, I'd be like, yes. And I was always nervous about being slow. But because I was self-sufficient, I knew how to read maps. I knew how not to get lost. I did my trip plan. I did my safety plan. I knew that even if I got separated from them, I would be fine. Like I know how to get myself out of a situation. I know how to navigate. Like I knew the plan. And in most instances, like I was the only one that was that prepared, right? And it gave me so much more confidence to go to places, even if I was the slowest one in the group, which is something I know like a lot of us are nervous about. So just another plug to being self-sufficient. It helps give you that calm confidence going into new group situations, right? Because you have your own back no matter what. So be patient as well. It could take time to find your good adventure buddy, but you'll be thankful to yourself for sticking it out and all your hard work when you actually do find that friend. So like when I made that connection with Alex, I'm definitely one of those people who likes a couple, 2 to 3 really close friendships. And then I'm like, good. Like, I don't need a bunch of people in my life. So, depending on what you are, some people like a bunch of friendships. Everybody has their own preference. But for me, all of the bad fits, the awkward conversations I had with people, the people that ghosted me, all of that was worth it to find like the Alex and Haley connections that I made here in Colorado Springs. So it's worth it if you stick it out. Tip number 5, this is the final tip, is possibly join a guided group experience. So one of the reasons, when we started She Dreams of Alpine, it was mostly an online learning space. But one of the reasons we started hosting in-person adventures a few years ago is because we know how important it is to make connections with like-minded women. And it's an important part of your growth and development, right? And encouraging you to like push further and see what's possible and what's possible for you, right? So this is just like a picture of some of our clients in one of our group trips. And I've shown you this picture before of just like us meeting. in real life. And what's really awesome is a lot of our communities already know each other maybe in the online space because they're inside of our Backpacking Badass program. And then they join an in-person experience and it just kind of deepens that connection with people. And we've had a lot of our clients make lifelong friendships out of these adventures. So if that is something you're interested in, I will say, like, this is not the number one thing we do. The number one thing we do is teaching you to be safe, confident, and self-sufficient in outdoors in the Backpacking Badass program. But we do have some rock climbing retreats, and we do host once a year. We have a cohort called the Adventurous Reinvention Experience. The only thing is that these spots are limited. So existing clients of ours, so existing students of the Backpacking Badass program, always get first dibs on any of our retreats. And like, for example, our Joshua Tree retreat always fills up before it ends up opening to the public. So that's like one that we just haven't quite made it. Like, spots usually don't make it. So our clients get first dibs. But if you are interested in learning more about that, you can go to episode 4 of my podcast called How You Can Work With Me to Hit Your Outdoor Adventure Goals on the Adventurous Reinvention podcast to learn even more. So our final takeaway is your dream adventurous community is out there. I want you to see it as part of your adventure era to go find them, and that the work is worth it. Hey, I wanted to thank you real quick for tuning into the show and listening all the way to the end. If you love this episode and you want deeper support in becoming a safe, confident, and self-sufficient hiker and backpacker, then head over to shedreamsofalpine.com/waitlist to learn more about our Backpacking Badass coaching program, where I teach you absolutely everything you need to know to be self-reliant on the trails and stop waiting around on others for the adventure invite. So I'd love to help you more in your journey of stepping into your adventurous identity, and that program is the absolute best place for us to start working together. So again, that's shedreamsofalpine.com/waitlist, and you can learn all about it there. So that's it for today, folks. I hope you get to spend some time outside this week, and I'll be back very soon with a brand new episode. Bye.